Hi everyone, Viking Guitar here, and it's been a little while. I've had some other stuff going on, but today we're going to do a guitar video, and this is not going to be something super flashy, but hopefully it'll be something that'll help you a lot in your guitar playing. And what we're going to talk about today are kind of my standard daily practice regimens for how to kind of just keep up my chops to some extent. These are less strenuous than if I'm prepping for a show or if I know I'm going to be tracking something that is going to be really taxing on, whatever skill level I have. But these are kind of simple, to the point things that I do just daily if I have time. They take somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes, so it's easy to fit in the morning or after work or something like that. And it just kind of keeps me a little limbered up and, not super rusty. So these were developed kind of from the mindset of where are the things that I tend to fall aside with. If I'm playing for a show or something, I tend to keep up my vibrato and my bends pretty well, but I notice something that goes away pretty quick when I'm not practicing for a while is just my consistency in rhythm and some of my left hand dexterity and right and left hand coordination and synchronization. So these are 3 exercises that I do to try and keep those up and lock down a nice super tight rhythm. Each one of these has a corresponding Reaper file with markers and a tempo setup that are going to be linked in the description below this video. So you can download those. If you have Reaper, you can open them and use them as a way of kind of directing your practice. If you don't have Reaper, you can download a free trial version that doesn't expire and is fully functional. It's a great piece of software. I recommend it. So without any more bullshit talking, let's get into them. Now, core and central to all 3 of these practice sessions is picking consistency and hand placement for picking. One of the things that I had to untrain myself with when I started learning to play faster was that I used to just root my hand in a certain position on the bridge down here, and as I would pick across different strings, I would fan my hand instead of moving where my anchor position is. And the downside to doing this is the angle of picking here is going to be different if your wrist is aligned with your forearm this way than it is if it's here. You're going to be picking at a different angle across the string, and it's going to affect your rhythm. Now, I'm not saying that's not a proper way to do it. I've seen people that play that way, and it works great for them. But for me, one of the things that this exercise, all these exercises help reinforce is proper movement of my picking hand across the bridge while I'm moving across strings. So that's one thing. The second thing is all of this is going to be to a metronome, and for those of you that have practiced with a metronome, you know the importance of it. For those of you that haven't, it's essential. It helps keep you practicing on a beat. And as much as you might or might not be able to do that without one, by just keeping track in your head or tapping your foot or something like that, you're shortchanging yourself. The whole point of these exercises is kind of rote mechanical training and locking in your rhythm. So don't shortchange yourself. Use a metronome. If you're using the Reaper files, the metronome, just turn it on. The tempo is set. Also with these 3 practice files, as you get better with guitar playing, or if you need to start at a slower speed, just change the BPM in the Reaper file. These are currently set to 150 BPM, which for me is a very comfortable speed at which I can do this and know that I'm not going to really be exhausted by the end of it. But if these are too easy for you at this speed, just up it to 160 or 170 or 280, whatever. And if you feel like you're still memorizing the scale patterns and the tempo is currently a little faster than you think is beneficial, slow it down. The important thing with this is you want to be able to play it as fast as you can without fucking it up. If you're making mistakes and if you're using poor technique, all you're doing is establishing bad muscle memory. So at the heart of all this is do it as fast as you can while maintaining good technique, making sure your picking hand placement is good, making sure your rhythm is still solid with the metronome, making sure that you're not doing bad fingering and fretting here by, using just the flats of your fingers. You want to make sure you're using the tips as much as possible, all that stuff. Now, along the lines of all of these exercises kind of cementing in fundamentals, each of the 3 has kind of a different focus. All 3 of them start with a period of around 2 minutes where you are doing nothing but picking. You're going to be down picking and you're going to be alternate picking. And I'm playing on a 7-string here because that's mainly what I play, but this totally works for a 6-string as well. And the basic premise is the first section of each one is just down picking to the beat, and you're going to be shifting across strings as you see fit. The way I tend to do it is I pluck, I think, 64 notes on each one, and then I move to the next string. I keep with the tempo, and I go up with the down picking about the lower 3 or 4 strings. My mindset with that is that most of my rhythm playing, most of the down picking I'm doing is on those strings, and if I'm doing any picking on the upper strings, I tend to use alternate picking. So you can adapt this as you see fit, but for me, that's what I focus on. So let's take a look at what that looks like at the beginning of these exercises. Now after the down picking, we go into a section of alternate picking. And this is where things get a little different. In the first practice session, the alternate picking is going to be the first of several alternate picking sessions. And I do this one the same way I did the down picking. 64 notes per string. Make sure you're changing strings after each 64 notes. This time go all the way up to the high E and all the way back down. Now, the way the sessions are set up, more or less, is that you can go straight from one section into the other, and in a perfect world, you would be doing that. None of these are terribly taxing on your abilities, hopefully, but they are long enough where it's about developing endurance. You know, if you're just down picking straight for 2 minutes, if you're not used to doing that, you're going to be feeling it in your forearm and your wrist by the end of it. Some of this is just muscle development. By the end of the left-hand exercises, none of them in and of themselves are too difficult, hopefully, but by the end, you're going to be feeling it because you're going to have been moving your fingers straight for about 18 minutes or so. So with the alternate picking, it's 64 hits, plucks, picks per string. Go on to the next one, keep going until you're at the top, then all the way back down, whether you're on a 6 or a 7 string or an 8 or 9 or whatever, and then we'll go into the next section. So let's see what that looks like. From here, we're going to mix things up a little bit. The first practice session continues to focus on alternate picking, and this section is more about maintaining an alternate picking rhythm during string skipping. So we have a section where it's going to be 4 plucks per string and then move to the next. And then we have the next section, which is going to be 3 per string and moving to the next. And with these, it's important to practice proper muting in addition to proper picking hand placement and proper rhythm and all that stuff. And there's kind of 2 ways you can go about this. Since we're doing 4 per string and then 3 per string, if you want to at this point start incorporating some left hand work into it just to either limber up or because you want to practice that timing, this is a great time to do so. And what I recommend is with the 4 note per string, 4 pluck, do the standard chromatic practice of and then when you get up there, reverse the process. With the 3 note per string, you can do the same thing, and you can even switch up the fingers if you want to. That way you start limbering up, start practicing some finger independence between the ring and pinky, which is another thing I like to focus on when I can. So let's see what that session looks like. The rest of the first practice session focuses on endurance and picking, and it moves from a 3 note per string to a 2 note per string, 2 plucks per string. And kind of the vehicle I have in place for this is running all of the various pentatonic scales. Now, if you know some amount of music theory, you probably know what these are. It's a 5 note scale before it repeats, and they're set up in different shapes, 5 different shapes on guitar for ease of playing. And I tend to play all of these at 5th position here up at the 5th fret. And even though I'm on a 7th string, I tend to ignore the 7th string when I'm doing this part of it. I don't know why. I probably shouldn't, but I do. So you're going to run through 2 notes per string, each scale for about 2 minutes or so, and then hopefully smoothly transition right into the next one. And after you do all 5, this first practice session is over. So let's take a quick look at what those 5 pentatonic scales are. Here's the first one. And here's the second one. And here's the third one. here's the fourth one. And lastly, here is the fifth pentatonic scale. So after you do all of those, you are done with that practice session. The whole thing runs about 18 minutes, and by the end, hopefully your hand's feeling a little tired. Not hurting, but just feeling like you're kind of developing muscle in that hand. And hopefully you're also feeling a bit more synchronized. So that is practice session 1. If you can't go through the whole thing, I recommend going through the down picking, all the alternate picking sections, and then the first couple of pentatonic shapes. Then take a few minutes, rest up your hand, kind of get used to it, maybe look over what the pentatonic scales are again if you need to refamiliarize yourself with them. Then do the next 2 or 3. And hopefully by the end of, a couple weeks of doing this, you'll be at a point where you can sit down, open the session, hit play, and play it all without stopping and without having any or too many errors. Now the second practice session is very similar to the first one. It opens with the down picking, then it moves to the section of alternate picking that is the 64 hits per string, and it doesn't go through the 4 hits per string and 3 hits per string alternate picking. It immediately goes into something almost identical to the first one, but instead of pentatonic scales, and instead of there being 5 of them, we are doing all 7 patterns of the major scale. So that's Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. And if you are not familiar with those, you should be, and I'm angry that you don't know them. But hey, today's a great day to learn. So let's take a look at them. Here's Ionian. And here is Dorian. here's Phrygian. And Lydian. Mixolydian. Aeolian, or the Iron Maiden scale. And then Locrian. Now we're going through these very similarly to how we're doing the pentatonic scales. We walk up, this time on a 3-note per string basis. We get to the top, not of the scale, not to the octave, but up to the highest note we can do in the current box pattern, and then we are walking it all the way back down. Focus on smooth alternate picking. Make sure, especially with the descending portions, that as for the notes where you pull from a pinky to your ring finger or your pinky to your middle finger, make sure that that second note is ringing out cleanly. One of the things that I need to fight against is weakness in the pinky, which means usually that I won't pull it off fast enough and I'll end up inadvertently muting or deadening that second note. This is exactly what the sort of practice is to train yourself against doing. So make sure you have clean picking. Don't palm mute, because that might hide deadened notes that you should be aware of. And you're going to walk up and down all 7 scales a whole shitload of times. And when you're done with that, you're done. Now, the third practice session opens with the same thing as the first two, the down picking segment, 64 notes per string, the alternate picking segments, 64 notes per string, and then it goes into something entirely different. Whereas the other two focus on, the bulk of it is alternate picking and left hand, right hand, alternate picking synchronization, utilizing scales. This third one is going to focus on some basic sweeping patterns. And for those of you that haven't done sweeping before, I'm sure you're aware of it. If you've ever walked into a guitar center, you're aware of sweep picking. And it's the type of thing that, just like everything else, benefits from slow, structured practice. Now, there's a lot of different scale forms you can use for this. For this practice session, I focus on probably the most common, which are D-shaped arpeggios. They're based on the shape of a D chord, one of those. And I'm not playing them in the 5th position like I do for the other practices. I'm playing them up with a root A around the 9th and 10th fret. And there are kind of stepping to music theory for a moment. If you have the major scale, and if you build chords out of the major scale using 3 notes per chord, you're going to end up with 3 different types of chords. You're going to end up with major, minor, and 1 diminished chord. And there are other chords, obviously, like sevenths and all that other stuff, but your most basic chord shapes are major, minor, and diminished. So what we are going to do is we are going to practice sweep picking major, minor, and diminished patterns. And we're going to do that with a 3-string version, a 4-string version, and a 5-string version. That's correct, 5 strings. And each one is going to go up, do a pull off for the next note, back down. A couple of quick tricks on sweep picking if you haven't done this before. Something that gave me a lot of trouble when I started was I would try to pick and then reload my picking position each time. And that's not the way to do it. That's just picking really quickly. What you want to do is, instead of picking and reloading, and watch my hand when I do this, that upward movement and then replacing, that's all lost time in sweep picking. Instead, what you want to do is you want to pick, pluck, and push through until the pick is just resting on the next string, and hold it there until you hit that next string. So, like that. That way you're not losing all that time doing lost time. Anyway, so we're going to do 3-string, 4-string, and 5-string versions of that. So let's take a quick look at what the 3-string looks like, and we're just alternating between minor, major, diminished, minor, diminished, major. Pick your order. This is 3 strings. And this is the 4-string pattern. This is the 5-string pattern. But anyway, go through all that, and then the third practice session is done. So those are the 3 main practice sessions I do on a daily basis just to keep some level of chops up. Keep the rust from growing too bad on the old guitar hands. There are obviously a lot of holes in these. There are tons of guitar techniques. This doesn't practice tapping. This doesn't practice bends or unison bends or vibrato. It doesn't practice chord switching. It doesn't practice all sorts of stuff. But these are kind of the main things that kind of keep me limber and keep me with some level of functionality. Now, as a bonus, there is one other exercise I tend to do that really focuses on pinky independence. And this is the type of thing that I can't do for 18 minutes, but it's something I toss in just around other stuff, or if I'm learning a song and want to take a minute to work on something else, this is a great one to kind of get used to having your pinky move freely of the other fingers. That's what they're called. So let's take a look at what this one looks like. And it's across 3 strings. I usually start at the 8th fret on the A string here and go from there. I start with the down pick, and then I'll do the same exercise after I do it for a couple minutes. I'll cleanly switch to starting with an up pick because it's kind of a different hand picking pattern. So let's look at it with the down pick. And now let's look at it starting with an up pick. Now, after you do this for a few minutes, you're probably going to be pretty tired with your hand, and that's exactly the point. It's to build muscle, it's to train your fingers to move independently of each other, and it's also to kind of get used to a different picking pattern, you're skipping strings and that sort of stuff. So this is the heart and soul of my practice regimen. Obviously, if I'm practicing a song, it's going to be different. If I'm going to be using another specific technique for tracking something that I know I haven't done in a while, I'll focus on that. But the whole point of practice is to focus on, well, to first off be honest with yourself about your playing. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And then why are you not good at it? And focus on the things you're not good at and put time into that, because the other stuff you've probably already got covered, at least for the time being. So I hope this helps. I hope you're enjoying playing guitar. These are obviously not the most exciting practice exercises, but they're fundamentals, they work, and they will make you a better player. Until next time, I'm Viking Guitar. Thanks for watching. Keep the world metal.